to another day of Bible study as we are continuing on through our study of the book. My name is Kevin Young. I have the privilege of being lead clergy here at Christ Table. If you'd like to find out more about Christ Table, who we are, what we do, you can visit that website right there, www.christstable.today. There you're going to find information about us, and I would encourage you to sign up for the email list there so that you will know everything that is happening around Christ Table. Now, if you'd like more information about this study in particular, you can visit the URL right there in front of me, go.christstable.today/thebook. There you can download a list of all of the studies, all 27 of them that we're doing here, and all of the texts that are attached to it in the Bible. But you can also download a full study guide that walks every day through the entirety of the text, a little background information, some deeper questions for you to maybe wrestle with or use in conversations with others, and even some helps for youth and children to assist you in having conversations about these texts with them if you choose to do so around your family table. You can download that PDF for free right there at that URL, or if you'd like the printed copy of that, you can get that as well right there. There's an opportunity for you to do that, and it actually helps us financially. If you're able to do that, then it helps provide these each and every day that we do them, but no need. We feel great about giving resources away. We want to do that, so make use of them. Now, this study that we are in is called The Book. It's 7 weeks where we are taking a look each week at different parts of the Bible to try to understand them. We kind of looked at the law, the very beginning of the Hebrew Scriptures. We spent some time in the prophets. We spent some time last week in wisdom literature, which is kind of the poetry and songs and some of the real kind of crazy books in the Bible, if I can use that word. And this week what we're doing is we're taking a little deeper dive into the wisdom literature, into one particular book, the book of Job. Yesterday we talked about how the book of Job is a story. It's an allegory. Didn't actually happen. The way it's written just kind of gives it away that this is poetry and high theater. Also, what we discovered yesterday was that this is a very ancient view of God, in that the book of Job is likely the very first book that was written out of all of the books of the Bible, even before the book of Genesis. Now, it doesn't take place before the book of Genesis, but it likely was written before the book of Genesis and was likely a story that was told in some way and eventually written down. Now, when we come to today, we're going to kind of move a little bit further into this idea of suffering. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about how Job experiences all of these worst kind of sufferings ever. And today, we're going to begin to talk about the dialogue that he has with some of his friends about this suffering. We're going to be in Job chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. Now, the interesting thing is that the book of Job is 40 some odd chapters. Almost all of those chapters, something like 37 or 38 of those chapters, are literally just the dialogue between Job, his friends, and his wife back and forth. And so there's a little bit of setup to the dialogue, then there's a whole lot of dialogue, and then God comes on the scene at the end. Again, this is allegory, theater, poetry, and kind of wraps things up, and then there's a conclusion, but most of the book is the dialogue. So why is that? Well, it's probably because there is this great tension between different people's views of God and how God is going to respond to suffering and how God is going to respond to humanity. And what we said about Job is a not sinless person, not a perfect person, but he is a person who was upright, who is righteous, and who does not deserve the things that have happened to him. And in that culture, if bad things happen to you, then you did something to deserve them. And so this is where we jump into the story here, where Eliphaz, one of the friends, the Temanite, is beginning his conversation with Job about the situation in which Job finds himself in. And out of all of the friends, Eliphaz is the kindest of all of them. So the rebuke gets harsher and harsher as the plot moves forward. So then Eliphaz the Temanite replied to Job, "Will you be patient and let me say a word? For who could keep me from speaking out? So Job has been talking a lot about how all of this has happened and how he didn't deserve it. And his friends are just kind of sitting there in silence for a really long time, taking it all in, but they are not believing it at all. And we've all had those situations, right? Where we are trying to convince our friends of something that has happened to us that is not right, and they just simply cannot or will not believe it. And this is a situation that Job finds himself in. And eventually the friend just says, hold up. Okay, are you ever going to give me an opportunity to break in here? Are you ever going to be patient? Let me say a word, because I can't keep silent anymore about what's going on here. I have to speak out against the things that you're saying, because you're lying to us. You cannot be an upright man. You cannot be a righteous individual, and these things happen to you. So now you need to listen to me. In the past, Job, you have encouraged many people. You have strengthened those who are weak. Your words have supported those who are failing. You encouraged all of those with shaky needs. I've seen your righteousness, and it's all I've seen out of you. But now when trouble strikes, you lose heart. You're terrified when it touches you. Yeah, you think so? Like all of his kids died. Doesn't your reverence for God give you confidence? Doesn't your life of integrity give you hope? Stop and think. Do the innocent die when the upright have been destroyed? My experience shows, and here we go, my experience shows that those who plant trouble and cultivate evil will harvest the same. I hear what you're saying, Job. I've never seen this out of you. Stop and think, though. How has it worked for every other single person that we have ever known? This is a pattern that has become a principle, that whenever you do bad things, you receive curse. Whenever you do good things, you receive blessing. That's what my experience shows. Verse 8, those who plant trouble and cultivate evil are going to harvest that as well. And Job, you have reached trouble. A breath from God destroys them, and they vanish in a blast of his anger. So what we're seeing here is a situation where Job and his friends are at an impasse. They are at odds with each other. And this is difficult because what we're seeing here is a lot of assumptions being made. And this is kind of what the point of the book is everybody is making assumptions about what is right and what is wrong, and where God is in all of this and where God isn't in all of this. And at the end of the day, almost everybody is wrong in their assumptions. So what is the assumption that's happening right here? Well, the assumption that's happening right here is that God rules the world in such a way that good is always rewarded and evil is always punished. Think about that for just a moment. I want to say that again. The assumption here is that God rules the world in such a way that good is always rewarded and evil is always punished. So again, God rules the world in such a way that good is always rewarded and evil is always punished. Now, we should not be too harsh on Job's friends, because frankly, this is the way that we operate often in the world as well, whether religious or irreligious, is that we receive rewards for doing good and living righteously, and evil is always punished. We kind of expect and want the world to live that way, right? And so we try to design the world in that way, where discipline comes to those who do wrong, and blessings and rewards and bonuses and benefits and pay raises come to those who do well, right? Slap the hands of the people who are doing wrong and encourage people who are doing right. But the difficulty is that even in our world today, right, sometimes the best people and the best workers and the smartest folks receive the short end of the deal, right? And oftentimes the people who are the worst human beings end up having the greatest blessings and rewards come to them. But we don't like that. And we don't want a world in which God rules in that way, right? So there is this assumption there that at least in God's world or in the spiritual world, that's the way that the world is going to work, is that it's going to work right, where wicked is always punished and good is always affirmed and blessed. But Job, this first book in the Bible, is a test case which proves that sometimes God allows people to suffer who don't deserve it. Now, I want to back up from that statement just a bit for a moment and say, for some of us, that statement is going to be abrasive, and maybe even for a few to the point of being offensive. This idea of God allowing people to suffer who don't deserve it is rough. We don't want to believe that. We don't like to believe that. We don't think that a moral or ethical being, especially one that is divine, should be working in that way. But this is the way God is framed in the book of Job. And we have to do something with that. Now, we can say that perhaps this is an ancient understanding of God, that now with experience and better understanding and more of the Bible and having, received Jesus and our modern wisdom, that we can look at God and not say conclusively that sometimes God allows people to suffer who don't deserve it. But in order to say that, we obviously have to take on some ownership of pushing back some theologies, maybe that some of us were raised with about God. And so it becomes very complex. It becomes very sticky. And oftentimes, whenever we come to the Bible, we really want the Bible to leave us with more answers than questions, with more problems solved than problems created. And what we're going to learn here in the book of Job as we continue to go through is that Job is going to resist doing that for us. And I will admit that many other places in the text of the Bible resist doing that for us as well, wrapping things up in a nice little bow so that we can have answers rather than questions. So why would the Bible not want to do that? Why would perhaps God want to leave us with questions rather than answers? Well, I would say that for many of us, we understand that faith is an element that is required for Christianity. If you're going to be a follower of the way of Jesus, faith is a requirement. And if you have all of the answers, you don't need faith. And so I might say at a 101 elementary kind of level perspective here that places like Job and other places in the Bible that leave us with more questions than answers are places that are leaving us with more faith than less faith. The other thing that I might say about this additionally is that whenever we kind of look at this question about the problem of God and the complexity of how God moves in the Bible, God does things differently in different places of the Bible. It's uncomfortable to admit that, but God does. And we have to wrestle with the complexity of that situation in Scripture. At the end of the day, and I want to pull this question out of today's study. I don't always do this, but I want to pull a question kind of directly out of today's study guide. And it's this: do you think that all suffering and tragedies are part of a larger plan by God? Is God, as in Job, kind of allowing these to happen? Or, said like the question, is God actually kind of planning for these things to happen for one reason or another? Or maybe it is that the open theism idea that God does not know all of the details about everything that will happen in the future because we are beings with free will. And if God is unable to impose on our free will completely, then God may not know every outcome of every situation, of every detail in the future. And maybe that's why suffering and tragedies happen. There are many answers to this question. Some of them aren't great. Some of them are fairly decent. None of them, I would say, that I have run across are perfect. And it's something that we all have to wrestle with. But places like this, the book of Job and the wisdom literature, are the perfect place and opportunity for us to wrestle with the deepest questions. Not so much because we might find conclusive answers, but we might find answers that give us peace or we might find better questions. Well, until tomorrow.